Good evening, or late afternoon. The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council from May 1st, 2018 is now in session. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Paul Ford, one of our neighbors and a good friend of many of us, and too many of us, has been battling cancer for over 2 years. Pretty debilitating cancer, and doesn't show much sign of being able to recover from it. His wife Helen has borne the primary burden of his care for that time, and of course is still working with him and caring for him. They decided recently that the treatment protocol for Paul's cancer was simply not working and was too debilitating to continue. I'd ask that you please join me in a moment of silence on behalf of these two very special people, Paul and Helen Ford. Thank you. Council, need a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Fred. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have an agenda, Council. Thank you. Council, I need to have a motion to approve the consent agenda, the minutes of April the 3rd and April the 17th, 2018.
So moved.
Thank you, Gary. Second?
Yeah, second.
Thank you, Fred. All in favor? Aye. Consent agenda has been approved. This time I'll call on the town planner, Wes Haskett. Good afternoon, Wes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report for y'all tonight for the month of April, or rather going to report just on the planning board meetings for the month of May. The numbers for the month of April will be reported at the next council meeting. So with respect to the planning board, on May 7th, there will be maybe the last special planning board meeting for the planning board to consider or continue discussion, rather, of the footnotes in Module 1 of the Town Code Update Project. And secondly, with respect to the next planning board meeting, that'll be held on May 21st. And at the meeting, the board will be considering 2 zoning text amendment applications from town staff as directed by council. The first is a ZTA to address the development of non-conforming lots, i.e. 50-foot wide lots. The second is a ZTA to add additional regulations for small cell wireless facilities to our current wireless ordinance. Any questions?
Any questions, Council? Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
David Cole, our police chief. Afternoon, David.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I owe you 2 reports, one from March of 2018. And as you can see, we had 1,933 calls for service total. See the breakdown as far as the pie chart down below. Actual crimes that were reported to us under incidents, we had a total of 32. Criminal arrests, we had 19. We had 6 motor vehicle accidents. Officers conducted 63 traffic stops, and out of that they wrote 30 citations and another 36 warning citations. And we had 0 ordinance violations for that month. Any questions on that month? April 2018, we had 1,366 calls for service. The crimes that were actually reported were 15. We had no criminal arrest. We had 1 motor vehicle accident. And officers conducted 72 traffic stops, and out of that 72, they issued 35 written citations and another 30 warning citations. And we had 1 ordinance violation for that month. Any questions? The only other thing that was not on the agenda, because I didn't know if we'd get it done in time, but we did, I'm going to present you with our 2017 annual report for the police department, and it'll be available, hard copies at the police department, and I believe Sheila's going to make it available on our website probably within the next day or so.
Those are some interesting videos that you make of the
Thank
traffic
you.
stops.
Thank you now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Before I ask Chief Limbacher to come up, I want to just acknowledge the fact that Mr. Nason's not here tonight. Mayor Pro Tem Nason, he called me last Thursday and had another commitment, family commitment for this evening, and will not be present. Hopefully back for the next meeting. Our Fire Chief, Ed Limbacher. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening. Just a couple things. Before I get to the report, I just would like to give a brief building update. Talked to Ken today, and basically he's through the final phases of the exterior finishes on the building, and he's also got all the engineers in place to finish the final design phase, so pretty much just moving ahead with that as planned at this point. I would also like to mention that yesterday, myself, the deputy chief, and 2 of our current junior members and 2 of our former junior members that are now regular members went to the First Flight High School and did a recruiting effort, probably a 30-minute PowerPoint. We're there maybe 5 hours just talking to different kids during different lunch periods and have several possibilities, so all we can do is keep trying to grab those young kids. So that was yesterday's activity. But for the month of April, the fire department responded to 37 calls, and just pretty simple: 1 building fire, 1 cooking fire, 1 fire in the structure other than it didn't involve the building, 1 brush fire, 1 outside equipment fire, which basically amounted to a receptacle on the back of one of the houses on the ocean front there, 7 patient assists, 15 EMS calls, 1 motor vehicle with accident with injuries, 1 service call, 1 assist the policing agency, 1 dispatch canceled en route, 2 smoke detector activations or fire alarm activations, and 1 lightning strike with no fire involved. Any questions?
Council. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Town Manager's report. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight's manager's report includes references to you for the fact that the capital street improvements for this current fiscal year, which pertain to streets, are now in the punch list stage, and most all are substantially complete. Also, I'd like to report that the lifeguards for Southern Shores are now essentially on call, taking any kind of calls on the beach. The 4-wheeler patrols will begin next week, and the 3 stands will go up right before Memorial Day. The 4th stand at 144 Ocean Boulevard will go up approximately June 21st in anticipation of school letting out. I did want to clarify to the council, as part of the report tonight, budget performance that you have already gotten for the current fiscal year. You were sent the budget performance on April 10th by the finance officer for the month end March 31, 2018. At that time, the total revenues realized by the town for the current fiscal year were $5,128,239, and the total expenses as of that date were $4,271,209, meaning a revenues over expenses of $857,030. So that's what it was as of March 31, and you'll be getting your April report as soon as closeout. So I just wanted to clarify that that is the budget performance for the current fiscal year. Did want to announce, of course, that as of today, the fiscal year 2018-19 proposed budget has been filed this afternoon and has been submitted to each of you and will be available for public inspection tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the various mediums of the town website, bulletin boards, and any online medias. It'll also be sent to the town sunshine list, and a public notice will be published for a June 5th public hearing, which I'll be asking the mayor to set after tonight. Accompanying with the final budget will be the customary line items, also the justifications that were reviewed by the council on April 17th. This is a balanced budget as required by law, and funds from the town's capital reserve fund have been proposed to fund a portion of the upcoming fiscal year's capital improvement projects. Some highlights from the proposed budget that was filed today, which will be available for public inspection for a month now before the public hearing, are the items that the council itself has directed to be included in the proposed budget. One is the new employee classification for deputy town manager / town planner, effective July 1, 2018, which was a council directive of February 6, 2018. Also, construction of East Dogwood Trail pedestrian path. That was a unanimous directive of the council February 20th, 2018. Also included in the proposed budget is a directive of the council for an increase in the annual appropriation for capital street improvements. That was directed on by the council on February 20th, 2018. Also included in today's proposed budget is an implementation for an architect's assessment of the town's facility needs. Directive of that was unanimously approved by the council on February 20th, 2018. And also included is the implementation of the coastal engineer's beach vulnerability study, directed by the council on March 6th, 2018. Also included in the proposed budget for next year are workforce expenses, of course, and for each of the town's employees' salary, as reported to the council on April 17th, proposed are a cost of living adjustment of 2.5%, the town's health care insurance premium increase of 4.5%, the FICA contributions of 7.65%, the mandatory contribution, retirement contribution for regular employees, 7.75%, the mandatory retirement increase for law enforcement employees, 8.5%, the employer 401k contribution for non-law enforcement employees is 5%, and the employer 401k contribution for law enforcement employees, which is mandatory, of 5%. The dependents' health insurance coverage offset, which the town provides its employees in lieu of benefits, remains at $7,800 per employee. Highlighting the finance and administrative department in the proposed budget, there again is no recommended property tax increase in this year's budget. Again, the town will remain, as of this proposal, free of all debt obligations in this proposal, and also the town continues to maintain a healthy unassigned fund balance, well exceeding the town's policy minimum as determined by the auditor on June 30th of each fiscal year. The Planning and Code Enforcement Department will continue to administer its contract, or the town's contract, for the town, the update of the town code of ordinances As reported to you previously, the remainder of that contract will roll over into next fiscal year, and a budget amendment will be required to appropriate to honor that legal obligation after July 1 to finish that project. The police department, again, we proposed the continuation of the successful school resource officer program at Kitty Hawk Elementary School. The police department will also, again, be providing officers for the mutual effort with area local governments at the US Highway 158 and NC 12 intersection during the summer on Saturdays and Sundays. As indicated to you at the workshop, this proposed budget does not include any cost of traffic reduction during the fiscal year 18-19. And of course, later in your agenda tonight, you'll be discussing the proposed weekend cost expense in June, which is part of this current fiscal year for the no left turn implementation. The police department will again be applying for several government grants for the purpose of obtaining modern equipment to enhance public safety in the town. And also proposed is the cost of the town's highly successful community resource officer during the summers. For Public Works Department and infrastructure improvements, the highlight, of course, again, is the proposed funding for the town's capital infrastructure improvements for the year. As you recall, the town practice has been to have a separate public hearing in July to prioritize and adopt a plan. Your capital infrastructure improvement planning committee has already made a recommendation at its most recent meeting, and that is available online for the public to look at. It'll be on the July 10th meeting agenda for you to consider as part of that public hearing in July, so the council can make its own decision as to what it wants to do. For the fire department, this current year, this current calendar year, you recall that the fire chief did come to the council and explained that he was proposing a $60,000 adjustment to the contract amount for the next fiscal year due to the fact that the fire department had to hire a deputy chief for the year due to the lack of a volunteer for that position. So included in the proposed budget for the fire department's operations for this year is an extra $60,000 to fund that position, to reimburse the fire department to fund that position. Also included in the budget this year for the fire department, as has been explained to you on a couple of occasions, is the proposed expenditure of $267,700 for projected debt service to the fire department for the remainder of next fiscal year if the town council is to decide in the fall to participate in the fire department's financing construction of a new fire station. And again, as we discussed, that is not the entire year's debt service. That assumes that a closing would occur in the first half of the fiscal year, meaning that interest would only become due in the second half. That would not be the amount that would be projected next fiscal year if the council chooses to participate in a new fire station with the fire department. And as I was reported to you before, there were two rollovers that will probably be necessary in July. One, of course, I mentioned previously, is the code rewrite project, the remainder on that legal obligation, and also the expenses for the fire department's architect, which the council committed to for this fiscal year. Those have not been all expended yet, and he will not finish his work until the fall. That amount that's left over will need to be rolled over in July as well, back into as an appropriation back into the budget. Again, I'll be requesting that the mayor place a public hearing for this proposed budget on the council's June 5th, 5:30 p.m. Council meeting. And we are always available to answer any questions or meet with any citizen who's interested in the budget, the proposed budget, at any time. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions about the filing tonight. Again, it is will be online tomorrow at 8:30 for every citizen. And of course, there'll be a month of public inspection available. That I did want to add one other thing. If there are any questions on the process, I'll be glad to try to answer those. I did mention that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee did make a recommendation, two recommendations at its previous meeting. One was to prioritize the capital street needs to be considered by the council in July, and the other was in accordance with the council's request that it come back with a request, with a recommendation to this council on the Fairway Drive inquiry by citizens, property owners along that street. And I believe committee co-chairman Jim Connors was going to report on that recommendation.
Yes, the Capital Improvements Committee met on April 4th, and that question was put to everybody. Previously, they had all gone out and looked at the street with the correspondence, with all the critique of the engineering and everything. But anyway, on April the 4th, the Capital Improvements Committee recommended 5-0 that no further action be taken on, no further capital improvements be initiated on Fairway Drive. It was a 5-0 vote. There was one committee member that was not there. That was Carlos Gomez. So that's why normally it would have been a vote of 6. But anyway, that's the Capital Improvement Committee's recommendation. I don't know if we need to vote on that or...
Well, that committee report is essentially a motion for which there's no second required. Is there any discussion?
We have a copy of it in here tonight. It's not on the agenda.
You don't have a copy in your folder, no. This was a report from Peter.
Yeah, the committee report was sent to the committee minutes were sent to y'all previously, but it's not in the agenda, no.
But it's not it's not on the agenda. So I don't think we should vote on it.
Is that fine with everybody else? Since it was not included in the agenda, not vote on it tonight?
Yeah, I agree. It's not
That's
on the
fine.
agenda.
All in favor of not voting?
You don't have to, you just don't vote.
Thank you. So we'll table that.
I'll answer any questions that council might have on the process of the budget filing.
Any questions? Who's down there? You have something, Jim?
Yeah, I got one question. When you were talking about development of the budget for the administration and this employees and everything, has anybody in the last couple months come into town hall asking for specific numbers of specific employees? You know, like how much specific employees make, what their COLA allowances, increase in taxes, benefits?
Not to me, or to my knowledge, to the finance officer, no.
Okay. See where I'm going with this? It's out there on social media now, but it was only provided to us as council people as far as our background, so. But nobody has approached the town to get this public information. I'll address it later in council comments. Basically, 3 town employees were doxxed here.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions for Peter?
It'd be, actually, it's a lot of information. It'd be nice next time if you had some slides up there to show what you were going over. Let me ask you a question. Those amounts you said, the code rewrite, the architect, is that included in that, I guess, excess we have this year as far as our budget?
It is not. As explained in the workshop, that will be proposed to you in a budget amendment in July. It will revert, the amounts that are left over will revert to your fund balance on June 30th.
Okay, so
And then
that's not included in the cost. So
No, it's not. That'll be an amendment.
how about the bulkhead project, the leftover from that?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you're
The
saying.
monies we rolled into the capital for the bulk.
That's in this year's, but it's part of the process of this year's budget, yeah, or this current proposed budget, yes. As I reported, I'm proposing use of the capital reserve fund to fund any capital projects for the town. So that's in this year's budget.
Okay, and you said you were proposing that we balance out of the unrestricted reserve next year?
I made a recommendation, and when you read this budget and the budget message, you'll see that the proposal is being made to use capital reserve fund monies to fund some of the capital improvement projects for this year. And that will balance this year's budget.
So, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What we have in the capital reserve is designated.
No, it's not. It's only designated for capital projects. And also, there's a smaller amount designated for canals.
Right.
Correct.
But it's
The rest of it is for any capital projects by town ordinance and by the state law.
So we're borrowing to balance.
I am proposing that the council appropriate from its capital reserve fund for capital improvement projects.
And I have one other question. When we started the fire department, we met with all the parties involved and everything. One of the things we were talking about was the contract. Where are we on that process?
The fire chief and I are ongoing, working on evaluating and talking about the process, and also have given some drafts to the town, to our respective attorneys for review. So we're in the middle, I would say we're in the middle of the process.
So
Right
will
now.
we have that in place prior to the budget being passed?
No. It is proposed for July 1, 2019.
Because we talked about that, getting that in place before we obligated ourselves to the fire station, having that contract. When we did
It may
that-
be in place prior to that, but it won't be in place prior to the end of the month of June.
I'm just saying we need to get that expedited.
Thank you, Gary. I'd remind all of you, all council members, they have the option of any time going and meeting with staff, talking to Peter, talking to Bonnie about anything on the having to do with the budget planning, where the money is coming from, et cetera, to make it clear in your mind of exactly what's happening. And don't hesitate to do that. I invite the public, make an appointment to go in and talk to our finance officer and see if you have questions you'd like to have answered. That's, there's no, we're not playing shuffling cards here. We're talking about real dollars, and we want you to be aware of how they're being allocated and how they're being spent. And you're welcome to come in and sit down with any member of staff that you'd like to talk to about it, Peter or Sheila, or, I'm not Sheila, or Bonnie. Thank you. Let's see, town attorney's report.
I don't have anything to report, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Planning board report. Good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I just wanted to mention a couple of things in my report. One is that we're changing the process of this report slightly. In the past, I have reported on reviews that the Planning Board has made and recommendations to Council. And the Mayor set up hearings, and then at the hearing, I give the same report. So to try to save some time, what we are doing now is I will just make a brief report on what we have done, and then at the hearing, I will make a full report. A good example of that is the one on shared parking. If you remember, a few meetings ago, I made a report on shared parking, and then tonight at the hearing, I'll have to make the same report. So that's just a change in process. Since I last reported to you, the Planning Board has reviewed some different ZTAs. One to establish parking signage and setback requirements for fire stations, and the other one is on lot coverage, the one that was sent back to the Planning Board to review. Now those I will report on when those come up for public hearing. And tonight, during the public hearings on ZTA 1801, 1805, and conditional use permit 1801, I'll report on those items during the public hearing. Are there any questions?
Council, any questions? Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
General public.
This time I'll open general public comment. Thank you.
You got one?
Thank you, David. David's got it, I think, Sheila. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sheila. Brian Kelly. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening. My name is Brian Kelly, 14 Palmetto Lane. And a few months ago, I came before this body to report a situation on Palmetto Lane that I thought and considered very dangerous. I went home and wondered if it fell on deaf ears. Well, I'm happy to report that as of a month ago, the problem was corrected. The job was done very well, with very little problem to any of the residents. I noticed in the paper this morning that we have overspent in the budget income, and one of the problems being fixing road problems. And that's one of the reasons we've overspent. Well, I'd like to say that that was the best money that was spent. I believe that if it would have not been corrected, that you would be facing lawsuits from one or possibly more people. And I'd like to thank this committee for what they did, and they did a wonderful job, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comment.
And while I'm up here, I have a little time, I just quickly want to remind you that for the past 20 years, we have celebrated Memorial Day at 9 in the morning at the Southern Shores Cemetery. And we will continue to do that, and I'd like to see a number of our committeemen and our, our council members there with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Al Yearling. Good evening, Al.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Al Ewing, 187 Dogwood Trail. What I have tonight most probably is a question for Ben, okay? With the planning board, I've noticed the procedures and whatnot that have gone through. And with this last one, nothing about against, I'm not trying to get into ZTA 1805. What I have is to make that ZTA fit, the planning board took and added all new language, conditions, and so forth, and split the old code, where we had 2.5 acres for a drive-through restaurant. Now there is a drive-through establishment large, a drive-through establishment small, with different definitions. The language has totally been changed and it has been split. Doesn't that create a new ordinance or code? And then shouldn't that go through the proper procedure and channels before it is approved? The whole thing turns around and is totally changed around. And it reads in separate paragraphs, not the way it used to read as one code.
Would you like me to respond, Mr. Mayor? I mean, we
totally
don't,
up to you.
we don't normally respond, but I was gonna mention this when we got to that point. it's not abnormal. That's, in a way, the planning board's role. So the way text amendments work is an applicant can come in and file for a text amendment, and they propose certain language. Sometimes that language is good, sometimes that language is bad. It goes to the planning board, and the planning board gets to make a recommendation as to whether or not it likes it, what it should change, or what it shouldn't change to this board. And then this board, as is going to happen tonight, they're going to have the public hearing and decide whether or not to change it. Sometimes what you get is you have the planning board's recommendation and the applicant's recommendation, and this board gets to look at both and doesn't care about either and does something slightly different. And what matters is what this board does, whether or not it needs to go back through the process. But all the planning board is in this process of text amendments is an advisory body. It makes a recommendation that this board does or does not have to follow. It's up to this board what to do. And the statute actually even provides that if the planning board doesn't provide a response to an application in a certain amount of time, this board can take action and have a public hearing and not ever hear a recommendation from the planning board. So planning boards are used as a step in the process.
I ran out of my time.
Yeah, I'm not sure, is that my time or is that Al's time? Do I get cut off now? But,
Yeah, I understand that, but I thought it was being a total new code being.
But that's not abnormal depending on the level of quality or the level of what's in the proposal to the, I wouldn't say quality because I know Mr. Strader, I think, was involved in this, so I'm sure it was fine quality-wise, but sometimes that's what the planning board's role is, in a way, is to look at those things and to come up with a better way to solve the problem that fits into the code. And they make a recommendation that, like I said, the council doesn't have to listen to. That the council can go and do what the applicant originally proposed, or it could do something else, as long as it doesn't make what's, at this stage, a substantial change in what was before the planning board. Then it would have to go back to them.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Al. Tommy Carroll.
Mayor,
Evening, Tommy.
Councilman, staff, hello. Tommy Carroll, 77 East Dogwood Trail. As we approach the no left-hand turn trial, I think it's important for the town to get the story out in social media, newspapers, our newsletter, as to what the plan of action is and how, when, why, and all the facts on how we plan to do it. As an employer of, at this point, about a third of my staff that lives across the bridge, although I'm not a Facebook guy, I can tell you there's a lot of misinformation out going around about, the legality of it, the fairness of it, how we can do it, how you can't do it. And I think it's important to start advertising that, here's the plan so there are no surprises. I think and I think that should include, the fact that there in July, 10,000 cars coming through that neighborhood, that it's affecting not only the safety, the quality of life, and the property values of the town of Southern Shores, and that we're deriving no benefit from it. We're a tourist town, but the majority we know where the majority of those cars are going. I ran into Jim out on a bike ride one day, and Jim, we were both out there. You didn't have all the information. You were coming off the top of your head, but I heard the cost that you had mentioned up in the $6,000 range to do that on any given weekend. You can correct me. We had talked about that, and I think that's about the number that you had said, about $6,000, and you'll have to. And I would think that that's on the high end. The town might consider, if you have the cones out and you have even an unmanned police car that the chief can supply, I think that's enough of a deterrent to maybe cut back on some of the overtime that we need to pay the officers. If at that point, when they see the no left-hand turn signs, they see the cones, they see the unmarked police car, if someone wants to run the gauntlet then let the regular patrol take care of business and ticket them or whatever the plan is, okay? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Can I comment real quick? Sure. Tommy, I agree with one thing you said. There's a lot of misinformation out there on Facebook and other social media, blogs or whatever, so it is good. As I think Mr. Rasco has indicated, it'll be advertised or information put out on town emails, town Facebook, et cetera.
Thank you, Jim. Just happened to flow right into old business, doesn't it? Affirmation of Council, September the 5th, 2017, directive for a single no left turn for U.S. Highway 158 South/Dogwood Trail weekend, Budget Amendment 13. I'll ask the town manager to address this for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This, as we've talked several times previous, is the agenda item to now affirm what you had directed previously, but affirm in the form of a budget amendment. What we have in place is an agreement with Department of Transportation to allow this. They will not change the lighting cycle. They will not change the intersection. They will not re-engineer the intersection. So everything about the intersection will be on the town of Southern Shores. The town of Kitty Hawk, of course, has jurisdiction over the intersection, and the town of Kitty Hawk has deferred to the Southern Shores Police Department for implementation of this. And as I go on, both the chief and also the Public Works Director are here to help me answer any questions that you may have. The traffic devices will be rented by the town. They're not going to be a cone. That's something, as y'all heard yourselves, the Department of Transportation was not going to allow. These are the heavier barrels that will be placed to prevent any vehicle from going in the left turn lane. So as you approach the intersection from the west to the light, there will be no way to turn left unless you cross those barrels. They will extend westwardly enough to prevent a left turn into Southern Shores Landing, egress and ingress there on the 158. They will be there from the hours of 8 to 6. There will be signage, of course, as well, no left turn. There will be 2 police officers, one at the, just as you come into the town of Southern Shores. They will be performing zero tolerance traffic infraction enforcement. So any left turn will get a ticket. They will be there after 6 o'clock in the afternoon. The company will pick up the barrels again, wait for the evening, and put them back down Sunday morning from 8 to 6 again. There will be no left turn. The traffic will be monitored by the police department, and as chief has indicated to the council before, he has counters in certain locations in the town to hopefully be able to evaluate what has happened on this weekend. That's the plan. The plan, if you approve that, approve the budget amendment tonight, you can see it is, the barrels will cost the town for rental $3,400 for the weekend to be placed, and also they'll have a man on duty that will be there to pick up and replace if anybody hits one. Police salaries for overtime will compute out to be $2,800. So the entire budget, recommended budget amendment to you is $6,200 to amend this current year's budget for June 23rd, 24th exercise. Be glad to try to answer any questions. The chief is here, and he's available to answer any of the questions as well, hopefully.
I got a question about renting the barrels, $3,400. Assuming this test is successful and everyone agrees that we would like to do it throughout the summer, Will that cost be incurred every weekend, $3,400, or will we get economies of scale, or?
No, sir. As I said at your budget session, if you decide to do this after this, then you have to come back to the table in July and rethink it. Because we will not have, as the chief will explain, we don't have enough manpower to provide officers out there for the rest of the summer or for June of next year, unless you change something major in the proposed budget.
Well, the question is on renting the barrels.
I don't know if they'll change their pricing or not over each weekend. I have no idea. I really don't know.
Okay.
We could put that out for proposal for different weekends and see for sure.
Any other questions, council? I guess we need a motion to agree to go ahead and do this on the part of council and fund this, this one weekend trial to see if it works. I'm a little concerned about the, I'm sorry, David, yes, you want to say something?
Chief, can you come up, please, to the microphone so it'll get recorded?
Just want to let you know, this is a one-time deal for us. I do not have enough officers to do this every weekend. And if you decide you want to do it through the summer, I'm going to have to put in for a couple more officers. And you will not see those officers this year. By the time we get them trained and certified, you're talking maybe the following year. But I just want you to understand that the folks from Hoboken, New Jersey are coming over that bridge aren't going to make a left-hand turn. And neither is the gentleman or the lady that's coming out of Martins Point and has a tea time at 9 o'clock in the morning. They're not turning left either. So this is a zero tolerance as far as we're concerned. And you have to understand, we're infringing on the town of the town of Kitty Hawk's jurisdiction. So I'm not going to park a car without an officer in it. I have a responsibility that the town is creating for the town of Kitty Hawk. So I've spoken with the town of Kitty Hawk Police Chief Joel Johnson, and I've assured him that we'll take care of any of the major issues, accidents that are going to occur at that specific location. So just understand that this is a one-time deal. I don't have the manpower to do this all summer. So,
Thank you, David. Appreciate those comments. That's something for us to consider, too.
okay, thank you.
Tom, you got some hands raised.
I'm not taking questions from the audience. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you want to speak, you can sign up for the next time around. Okay, thank you.
You got a gentleman back there that wanted to comment.
I'm sorry.
The guy in the back, in the blue.
Yeah, he can sign up for public comment as well.
Just say.
You're welcome to sign up for public comment for the next session, folks, if you want to comment on this. Council, it's up to us to discuss this and decide how we want to pursue it, what kind of direction we think we should take with it. I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of it. The fact that this traffic is going to go somewhere. They're going to go to Highway 12 and 158 for sure. We know that. Are they going to stop before they get to Highway 12 and 158 and cut through Juniper Trail to Trinity and up into Chickahaw? Probably so. Are they going to make the most likely scenario the feedback I'm getting from the NCDOT people is they're going to do exactly what they did last year, which is go up to the first available left turn, which is a shopping center, and either make a U-turn and come back and make a right turn on South Dogwood, or they're going to come up, cut through the shopping center to Juniper and Trinity and go through that way. I'm not sure we're not just transferring the problem two blocks further along. I don't know. Only with traffic counting will we know how it impacts the traffic on Sea Oats and Wax Myrtle and Hillcrest. We won't know that until after the fact. And that's the reason for this trial, to see if it actually makes any difference. That's kind of my thoughts on it. I'm not against it. I feel like it's worth trying. I've spent a lot of time with the NCDOT people talking about some of the options we could consider other than this, and there weren't very many other ideas except just try this and see if it works. So while I have reservations, which I just stated about it, I still think I would support, if council agrees to it, to try this one-shot weekend and see how it plays out. I'm not sure, though, as I said a minute ago, it's not going to create some pretty serious unintended consequences.
I got a comment, Tom. After the chief spoke, I'm beginning to wonder whether it's even worthwhile to spend the money on the test if we can't, if it's successful. We're kind of stuck. If we don't have the manpower to police it, how are we going to be effective going forward in the summer? I'm all for trying to do something to curb the traffic, and I'm hearing all kinds of comments from people in the community about it. Some are really for it, some are really against it. It's hard to say really what the best approach is, and I'm just wondering if maybe we ought to table this to the next meeting, and in the meantime solicit comments from the public and really see how people feel about it, because it's going to impact everybody in Southern Shores as well as tourists coming through. The impact for some people will be very positive, and others it's going to be negative. So I don't know. Maybe we should table it and wait and hear from the public. I know there's several people in the audience here that are directly impacted, and they need an opportunity to speak before we take a vote.
Any other thoughts on that, Council?
If they're here, I'm wondering why they're not speaking. I mean, we would love to hear from them.
Well,
I've just heard for a very long time that people have gotten up and spoken at public comments about implementing a no left turn there. I mean, we're on the jump off point. If there's some hesitancy amongst the public now, now would be a nice time to know
Yeah,
it.
the only problem is, Jim, we got a pretty small percentage of our population of the town in this room. They all have opinions, they all have a right to their opinion, but they don't reflect the entire community. I don't know how you'd ever get that, except through a poll of some sort, some kind of a poll. Personally, in talking to the residents of Wax Myrtle, a lot of them, Sea Oats, Hillcrest, there's it's mixed feelings. They don't really like the traffic, but they don't want to have their option of coming up South Dogwood when they come back from a trip to Virginia Beach or to somewhere else in some other place in Dare County or Currituck County, to be able to use that road to get home. Most people I talk to say it's an inconvenience. We just live with it. We just don't go anywhere on Saturdays and Sundays unless we absolutely have to. I don't know the answer. I'm not disinclined to agree with what Fred said. Let's just table it till July and reconsider. We want to try it.
No, I say you table it until
the
June. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Put it this way, most of the people that I've talked to are directly impacted, and they're in favor of it. But what bothers me, and the chief provided some good information, if we can't police it, I mean, what's the point? Nothing's going to happen. We've got some really tough decisions to make, and we're kind of here at the last minute trying to hire police officers that are not going to be ready in time based on what he's provided.
Yeah, and Kitty Hawk has advised us way back they would not be involved in it. They would not furnish any police presence.
So this all kind of goes back to planning. I mean, we should have taken action much earlier. As far as more police or whatever. And there's a lot of discussion about the cost. What's it going to cost the town? I mean, we're talking about a lot of money.
Well,
And that's where the public needs to have input.
let me address the planning question. I don't think it was possible for our town staff or our police chief to plan for something that we hadn't decided we wanted to do.
No, I'm not blaming them. I'm blaming us for
Well,
not doing a better
that's
job
okay.
of planning.
I'll take some responsibility for that. Any thoughts, Gary?
Well, yeah.
Short, brief thoughts, Gary?
My thought is, we said we were going to do it.
Yeah, on a trial basis.
That's right. I mean, that's what we have come to this point, and now we're hedging. I mean, we said we were going to do it,
I agree.
and you know it, and I know it. So I make a motion, we make this adjustment, this a budget amendment, and move forward.
and do our one-time trial.
do our one-time trial. I know we can't do anything after that, but at least we will have some information as to what it does and how it affects our town.
One question for the police chief. Will you be able to get some traffic counts on how many people do use the Dogwood corridor?
Well, more importantly, what's the traffic on Sea Oats and
Yes.
Sea Oats and Wax Myrtle
Hillcrest?
and Hillcrest.
We will try to do as much as we can. I'm more concerned about South Dogwood, how much more is going to pick up on Juniper. Those are our two key locations. And then we'll put some other counters out.
You got a plan, so, to collect some data. So
I think, I'm sorry.
that data would be as interesting to look at afterwards also.
I think it's going to be key to see what's happening up on Sea Oats and Hillcrest too during this
I think it'd be, the data we really need would be how it does affect out there on Hillcrest and Sea Oats and how it cuts that back on going in South Dogwood and Hickory. Of course, we're gonna have people who are gonna try the next thing, which would be Juniper. But Juniper doesn't come out on 12 and give you any advantage. So they'll quickly find that's not they may back up in there, but they're not going anywhere.
I'd like to also comment that the town of Southern Shores is pretty much treading new territory here. There's not a whole lot of examples of people successfully cutting, eliminate and cut through traffic. There are examples where they've done something, but it's kind of unique problem we have here on the Outer Banks in dealing with this. So what we should have or could have done, I don't think is as relevant as the fact that we're about to try something. Let's get some data. Let's see if
Short
it's,
of closing the bridge
or building another one.
over to Duck.
So Gary's made a motion that we go ahead and do this experimental one weekend test and see how it goes. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion, council?
Well, I guess I can support testing it, but where do we go from there? I'd like to see us be more effective with it and be able to, assuming the test is going to be successful, pursue it even more.
Well,
But it doesn't sound like we can do it. Our hands are tied.
There might be the alternative of closing that Dick White Bridge, which was discussed by the Dogwood Trails Task Force. That gives us another option we could consider, probably at a lower cost. Any further discussion, council, on this motion? All in favor? Aye, aye. Motion is made and carried. Yes,
Mr. Mayor, I'm assuming the motion that was made reference to the budget amendment, so we'll
Yes, sir.
record that as a motion for the budget amendment to implement this.
Yes, and that budget amendment then would cover the cost of doing this. Thank you, Peter. We have some items on new business. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over for a public hearing on ZTA 1801 to our town attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a public hearing on ZTA 1801, a zoning text amendment application submitted by Southern Shores Crossing LLC to amend the Southern Shores Town Code by amending Section 36-163 off-street parking requirements. This is a legislative public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak, I believe there was a sign-up sheet. We'll go through the sign-up sheet, but I'll also ask for members to raise their hands and be recognized at the end. We'll try and softly keep it limited to 3 minutes. This is not a sworn testimony. This is, again, a legislative hearing. Sam, you didn't provide a report on this earlier. Did you plan to provide a report as part of the hearing for this one? Okay, well, we'll let
Sam go first.
Yeah, well, let me ask Wes. Wes, would you prefer to go first or Sam go first? Okay, well, Mr. Mr. Williams, why don't you go ahead first, and we'll have Mr. Haskett, and then we'll have the applicant, and then we'll take comments from the public.
ZTA 18-01 is on shared parking, and this is commercial parking we're talking about, and it's to allow shared parking among the same or adjacent commercial lots as a conditional use in the commercial zone when peak hours of operation differ. A simpler way of saying that is, or I hope it's a simpler way of saying that, is that different businesses require different number of parking spaces. If you look at the code, it's based on seating, it's based on a variety of things. And so the town looks at the commercial site and determines if there's enough parking. Well, what happens if you've got, in the case over here, if you've got Coastal Provisions that is very busy one night, and the pizza place is very busy, and the other restaurant over there is very busy, that main parking lot could be very full, and so the overflow parking could park down at Southern Shores Realty. And that's what we talk about, shared parking. And but that would have to be at different times of the day. Southern Shores Realty is open during the day. The restaurants for a lot of their businesses are open at night. So that's the concept behind this. Also, in the ZTA, we've put in a requirement for safe pedestrian crossings that must be installed so that people are just not walking out into the street. In the example that I gave, you could install some stairways so that you get from the Southern Shores Realty parking lot up into the main part of the parking lot. And also, prior to approval of the conditional use permit, the parties involved have to develop a shared parking agreement in recordable form and executed by both property owners about the shared parking. And that agreement must be submitted to the town, not for approval, but for review, so that they make sure, the town can make sure that, the parking is still available for, other businesses. And if one of these businesses changes, God forbid, Coastal Provisions goes out of business, and they get somebody else in there, the town would have the opportunity to look at that shared parking agreement before it, so they could see what the parking agreement is. The planning board found the ZTA to be consistent with the land use plan, and the planning board recommends approval of ZTA 18-01. And are there any questions for me?
All right. Do you have a question, Mr.
Yes.
Bell? Go ahead.
Those businesses are okay right now with parking, are they not?
I don't know. All I can tell you is that the ZTA was presented to the planning board for consideration, and the planning board doesn't go out and do traffic counts. But it's my understanding that it's a possibility of a problem, and that's why it came before us, was presented to us.
I mean, they're all open now, and they have license, and they're operating, so I assume they've met all the codes in order to be open. So are we?
And that question probably would be better asked of the applicant.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Williams? Okay. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Mr. Haskett?
Thank you. Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, Ben, members of council. I'm trying not to repeat what Sam has already brought to your attention. This application was submitted by Southern Shores Crossing LLC. The applicant's representative is Mike Strader with Quabbel and Associates. and they're requesting to amend the town zoning ordinance by amending Section 36-163, off-street parking requirements. This would allow language to allow shared parking as a conditional use. They'll have to go through the conditional use permit process, which requires the planning board's review and subsequently your approval, should it be approved. Following an issuance of a conditional use permit, the proposed language would allow the following. Within any one site or on contiguous commercial sites, the required parking for any number of separate uses may be combined on the site or sites, but the number of parking spaces required for one use may not be assigned to another use, except as provided in the proposed language. Parking spaces required for one use may be used to meet the parking requirements of another use, or on the same or on contiguous commercial parcel or parcels when the peak hours of operation and parking demands of the uses occur at different times of day. Prior to approval of the conditional use permit, as Sam stated, a shared parking agreement in recordable form must be executed and recorded at the Dare County Courthouse between both owners of the shared parking establishments. With respect to the town's land use plan, the land use plan contains policy 2, which is related to the application, and that is that the community values and the town will continue to comply with the founder's original vision of Southern Shores, which is a low-density residential community comprised of single-family dwellings on large lots, served by a small commercial district for convenient shopping and services located at the southern end of town. This blueprint for land use naturally protects environmental resources and fragile areas by limiting development and growth. With respect to a recommendation, as Sam stated, the planning board determined that the land use plan is consistent with the application. Town staff made that finding as well, and the planning board unanimously 6-0 recommended approval of the application. You've received a copy of the proposed language in your packet, so I'll be glad to try to answer any questions y'all may have.
Does anybody have any questions for Wes?
Can he answer my question?
Probably not.
I guess my question is this to be able to respond to the peak season, the vacation time when the lots tend to fill up and the overflow would have a place to go?
This kind of ties into what Mr. Councilman McDonald asked earlier, and the applicant can address that, but the main issue is with the required number of spaces versus the provided number of spaces on a site plan. I believe there's a unit or two that is vacant, and in order to allow a use to go in there, which requires a number of uses, most of the parking spaces provided on the site now as it currently exists are already designated for those specific uses that are currently in business. Therefore, they're, according to the site plan, because it's based on our zoning requirements or current requirements, they can't provide enough parking spaces to meet the requirement, if that makes sense. But they can attest to what the availability is. I think it's 1 or 2 spaces, but they can touch on that. So it's a matter of allowing them to have more spaces per ordinance.
Does anyone else have a question, Mr. McDonald?
Well, part of the intended effect then is to help fill up vacant businesses, right?
Yes. That would be a result, yes, sir.
I got a question, Wes. Refresh our memory. I believe about a year or so ago, we addressed the parking issues in the shopping center. And if I recall, did we not agree to allow the spaces to be even smaller so they create more spaces?
That's correct. There were some amendments made to the parking requirements for, I believe it was restaurants, professional offices, and I believe retail. And that did provide more spaces, but I'm assuming more spaces are needed.
Okay.
There have also been amendments to the site plan that allow more spaces, but again, the applicant may be able to address that, and that I think he'd rather, I can't speak for him, but he may be more inclined to go with the proposed text amendment as opposed to making physical improvements to the property.
And Wes, this wouldn't apply just to this shopping. I mean, this would
That's
apply
correct.
to any commercial
It would
area.
apply to any commercial zone property. Yes, sir. I was going with the example in the question.
This would seem to make sense to me, but are you aware of this being a precedent in other towns or communities?
I'm not sure of others, but I know the town of Kitty Hawk allows for shared parking. I think this language was modeled similar to that. I'm not sure about the town of Duck, Kildover Hills, Nags Head.
Any further questions for Wes? Thank you, Wes. Is
Thank you.
there anyone from the applicant who wishes to speak? Mr. Strader?
Mike Strader here. I can speak to the reason of why we're trying to do the shared parking. Currently, at the real estate office, I have an estimate of more than 10 parking spaces that are not required there. Getting involved with the shopping center and dealing with the businesses that will make it, the ones that are already in business, I'm finding that more parking spaces are required for those businesses than the shopping center was originally designed for. Currently, I have an event business in there where normally it might have only taken up 12 parking spaces, but because it's classified as an event, it requires, I believe, 22 parking spaces. And I currently have 8 parking spaces available. I've talked with people that currently have operating business, the question of moving it to the shopping center, where I would need more than double that for their type of business. And yes, I am looking at and planning on getting some more parking spaces in the shopping center, but I would rather I'd rather not harden all the soil necessary to provide the parking needed for the businesses that will make it to go into the shopping center. So that is part of the reason of asking for a shared parking ordinance, is because I have unnecessary parking spaces at an adjacent property.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any?
Thank you.
Do you have anything else, Mr. Stone? Does anyone else
See
have any
that?
questions for Mr. Stone or Mr. Strader?
See, my comment, my thought was, are we causing you unnecessary hardship asking you to do that? Because are those two separate parcels?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Those two separate parcels owned by separate entities and separate stockholders.
good deal.
Thank you, Mike.
Anybody else have any further questions? Sheila, do we have a sign-up sheet for this one? No one signed up. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this proposed text amendment? If you can raise your hand really high. Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone. I'll close the public hearing on ZTA 18-01 and give it back to you.
Thank you. What's your pleasure, council?
I make a motion, we approve this.
Motion on the floor to approve this ZTA? And second of that motion by Mr. Newberry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'd call for the vote. All in favor of approving this?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Same sign. Motion made and carried to approve zoning text amendment 1801. Thank you. You get that, Sheila? Got it. Thank you. All right, at this time, I'll turn over the meeting to you once again for zoning text amendment ZTA 1805.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and we'll open the public hearing, this, again, for ZTA 1805. Zoning text amendment application submitted by 5415 OBX LLC to amend the Southern Shores Town Code by amending Section 36-57, Section 36-163, and Section 36-207 to establish a drive-through facility or establishment small as a conditional use in the C General Commercial Zoning District and applicable parking requirements. And Mr. Williams, if you would like to go first again. Again, this is another legislative hearing, and it'll be operated very similar to the last.
On this is ETA. It came to the planning board to establish an ice cream shop as a conditional use in the commercial zoning district. And where they wanted to establish an ice cream shop is in that small lot between the two banks out on 158. And the planning board, in discussing it, myself and one of the other board members, one of the first comments that we had was, it seems awfully specific for just an ice cream shop. Is there anything that we can do to broaden it so that we don't have to come back and do a ZTA if, for God forbid, a business in there fails and another business comes in and it's not something that's already on the list, that we would have to go through the whole ZTA process again. So what we did is we looked at it and we said that if you stop to consider the drive-through facilities that is currently in the code, there's just one, and it's not for a lot greater than 2.5 acres. And if you remember, that was put in there because of the desire of the owners of the marketplace to build a new drugstore out next to the highway, and the drugstore wanted a drive-through facility. And the town, for a long time, has not wanted drive-through facilities because they were very concerned that fast food establishments would end up in the marketplace or other commercial sites here in town. So what we decided to do was to establish a new category of drive-through facilities. And we referred to it as drive-through facility, paren small. So we made the existing language drive-through facility, parens large. And on the small one, what we discussed was, well, how big is that lot? It's 18,600 square feet. It's under 20,000 square feet. And we looked up and said, well, how many square feet are there in the McDonald's across the highway? And that's about 48,000. I think in West, wasn't that, it was about 48,000 for the McDonald's? And the Wendy's that's in there is in about 28,000 square feet. So that lot is less than 20,000 square feet. So we said, well, I don't think there's going to be a fast food restaurant in there, just not going to meet their needs, but there might be another business, such as the applicant, wanting a drive-through facility. So that's why we set up the drive-through facility small. And in looking at the materials, I don't know what's in your packets, but if you have looked at the site plan, it's a very tight site plan, and but it still serves the needs of the applicant. And we did put something in there that they must have frontage on Highway 158. And that was put in there because our ETJ representative pointed out that in Barton's Point, all those businesses come out onto an access highway or access road. So that was put in specifically for them. Doesn't read with the exception of the ETJ. It's just that the way the word is, the language in there, it still allows the ETJ to come out on that access road. It has the approval, maybe approval is the wrong word, but the approval from NC DOT for a driveway coming in. That's a turn lane, if you stop to think about it. So turn into the banks, turn into this facility. It has the, I've got it here someplace, in addition to NC DOT. I don't remember whether the health department permit is in there yet or not. Let's see. What other requirements are in there? I don't have the whole package with me, but Oh, the police department signed off on it, and the fire department signed off on it. So we made sure that that was in there. And so the planning board found that the ZTA was consistent with the land use plan and recommends approval of ZTA 18-05. Are there any questions?
Does anybody on the board, on the council have any questions? And I will ask that you can use the upcoming actual application maybe as an example, but recall that this will apply on any 20,000 square foot lot. That this area over here could change, the area towards Martin's Point could change, this, the shopping center down here could change, and if someone had a lot that this fits on, it could go there. So it would not be forced just to this lot. So I would ask that you keep in mind that it's going to be separate from the application that you may consider in the next public hearing. That this is a generally applicable ordinance, and that it's not as important to focus on the details of the application. It's going to be a part of the next hearing. Do you have a question?
I got a question. You made a comment at the beginning of your presentation that the reason we went, or the town went, to 2.5 acre requirement for drive-throughs was because the people of the town did not want a lot of fast food restaurants popping up. Is that the reason?
That's my understanding, yes.
So have you done anything to determine what the town wants now?
Once now, no. There hasn't been a survey recently, and I don't know of an old survey that specifically says they don't want fast food. But at the time that I've lived here, every time I've been involved in any public hearing or workshop or seminar, it's been very clear that people don't want fast food restaurants in Southern Shores.
Okay.
Any further questions?
So I guess my question is, if I have a fast food restaurant that I want to put there that meets these requirements, I can put it there,
Yes.
like a cookout or something like that that goes through really fast and doesn't really want you eating there. So,
If there is a facility, a drive-through facility, that you can fit in under on a 20,000 square foot lot, and if you look at the site plan, the parking is limited, and so, yeah.
So you could put a McDonald's Express in there.
I'm not familiar with McDonald's
You put a real
Express.
small one, so
I'm not familiar with McDonald's Express.
it's kind of like a White Castle only at McDonald's.
very
Just come and
small.
get it and go.
Yeah, in that case, I suppose you could.
What about, did y'all discuss congestion as far as that's intersection and 158? I mean, you're right at the stoplight.
You're down from the stoplight a little ways, and also this exit, you could also exit out the back, just like the bank does next door,
So there
out
is
into
a-
the marketplace parking lot.
There is an exit to the back.
Yes.
Is there any further questions by council for Mr. Williams? Thank you, Mr. Williams.
And one of the other things that I failed to mention that I want to mention, if you've looked at the drawings that are in your package, it was designed so that it has a lot of the features of the old flat tops that we have in town. So,
Thank you.
One more question
Is it about
about this.
this specific lot, or is it about,
It's about this specific lot.
why don't we save that till if we have the quasi judicial hearing on the specific application?
Well, my question is, do we have to change this code? Could the planning board have given a conditional use without making any adjustments to the code? Because if this passes, then we are tied to it anywhere and everywhere in commercial.
we could not have made it without any changes to the code, because the current language in the code talks about drive-through facilities being on a 2.5 acre lot or larger.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Any further questions? Thank you. Mr. Haskett?
Thank you, Ben. Good evening again, Mayor and members of council. The next application on the agenda tonight is ZTA-1805. The applicant again, or in this case, is 5415 OBX LLC. The applicant's representative, again, is Michael Strader with Quibel and Associates. And the requested action is amendment of the town zoning ordinance by amending Section 36-57, definition of specific terms and words, Section 36-163, off-street parking requirements, and 36-207C, General Commercial District. The applicant is proposing to amend these sections to establish drive-through facilities or establishments, small, as a conditional use in the C General Commercial Zoning District. The proposed language defines a drive-through facility or establishment small as a customer service facility located on a lot less than 20,000 square feet within their principal structure. It serves items over a general service counter for the customer to carry to a small seating area, to a motor vehicle, or off premises. The proposed parking requirement for the proposed use is one parking space for each 3 customer seats, plus 1 additional space for each employee. The proposed language also requires that drive-through facilities or establishments small not exceed 2,500 square feet. The location must be a minimum of 100 feet from any residentially zoned property, and it must allow stacking for a minimum of 6 cars in the drive-through area. And lastly, lots containing a drive-through facility or establishment small shall have frontage along U.S. Highway 158. Finally, the language proposes to amend the town's current definition of a drive-through facility or establishment by adding parens large, which requires that such uses must be located on lots greater than or equal to 2.5 acres. The town's currently adopted land use plan contains the following policy that applies to the proposed amendment, and it is, again, Policy 2, that the community values and the town will continue to comply with the founder's original vision of Southern Shores, a low-density residential community comprised of single-family dwellings on large lots, served by a small commercial district for convenient shopping and services located at the southern end of the town. This blueprint for land use naturally protects environmental resources and fragile areas by limiting development and growth. With respect to a recommendation, town staff and the town planning board have determined that the amendment is consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan. And as Mr. Williams stated, the town planning board recommended approval of this application, and it was 4-1. For this agenda item, you received a copy of the application and the proposed language in your packets. If y'all have any questions, I can try to answer them at this time.
Does anyone have any questions? Mayor?
And looking at the site plan, one of my concerns is the rear exit, if you will. Does that transfer over to the bank property adjacent where their driveway cuts across the right rear corner of the site? It does.
Yes, if you look on the site plan in the northeast corner,
Yeah.
the bank adjacent to it, to the proposed use, this is in the next agenda item, but there's the drive-through that exits the bank that currently exists today, crosses the subject property. So
Okay.
the driveway for the proposed use in the next application will actually tie into the encroaching driveway for the bank that
Okay.
goes into the shopping center.
I had a hard time seeing that, but now I saw it finally where you could get out that way.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Wes.
Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Haskett.
Yes,
Did
sir.
anybody sign up for this one?
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
My apologies.
Steve Kousis?
Crucis.
Kousis.
Yeah.
Actually, hold on just one second. Did the applicant, Mike, did you want to say anything?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry about that, getting to the public, getting ahead of myself. If you could come forward and provide your presentation. And remember, we're talking about the text amendment now, and we're going to talk about the detailed application in the next
What I
hearing.
plan on doing is just briefly talking about myself and New Quality, the business, and any technical questions or issues Mike could handle. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and city staff. I want to thank you for the opportunity to take a few minutes to talk about New Quality Ice Cream and myself. My name is Spiros Yanakopoulos. I live in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. My wife and I own a home here in Southern Shores. We're members of the Southern Shores Civic Association, and we have 2 younger children, and they absolutely love it here. We're here practically every weekend. Eventually, my wife and I would like to retire here. My family has been in the restaurant business since the 1970s. My parents co-owned a restaurant in the Great Bridge section of Chesapeake. They have and continue to own a home here in the Outer Banks since 1985. I started my restaurant career here in Elizabeth City in 2001, a few years after graduating college. New Quality Ice Cream has been serving northeastern North Carolina since the 1960s. We are a family business. One of our slogans is good family fun. Our customers range from infants to the elderly. It's a special place in Elizabeth City, and we hope to make it a special place here in Southern Shores as well. When designing the building, is there any way we can get an image, of the, can we do that, or is that the next one?
That's more
Okay.
to go with the next.
Well, when designing the building, we put a lot of thought and energy into incorporating the history and character of Southern Shores with the flat top homes located here. This design reflects the flat top homes here of Southern Shores. It was very important for us to do that. Our building colors in Elizabeth City are blue and white. However, for this location, we chose a softer green color in order to better resemble the flat top homes. We also want to be an asset to this community. In Elizabeth City, my wife and I, through our businesses and personally, have tried to support our community in the places which we do business in. One of our main passions is children and education. We invest heavily into the local schools. We provide free ice cream gift cards to elementary students who take the EOGs. We donate and sponsor to the Elizabeth City Education Foundation. We donate time and resources to the local school teachers. My wife was an educator. She was a third grade teacher, and she's constantly in the school volunteering in the classrooms in whatever capacity they need. I've been in contact with Dr. Gregory Florence, principal of Kitty Hawk Elementary School, and Ms. Shirley Myers about partnering up. We have already sponsored 2 small events for them and look forward to doing much more in the future. We have also partnered with the Center Players, which is a local children's theater through the Ulster of the Albemarle in Elizabeth City. I also serve on 2 boards. I serve as a board member of the Albemarle Boys and Girls Club, and also serve as vice chairman of the board for ECDI, which concentrates on Elizabeth City downtown and its development, and is also responsible for putting on the annual Potato Festival in Elizabeth City. Again, my wife and I want to be an asset to this community. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight to who we are and the kind of businesses we run. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does the council have any questions? Okay, and Mr. Strader, do you have anything to say?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As you may know, my name is Michael Strader. I'm an engineer with Quibon Associates. I'll be the civil engineer of record for the proposed zoning text amendment submitted before you. I think it's important to acknowledge that the proposed zoning text amendment language that has been drafted, it's been drafted that it's sensitive to the community values and actually the town's original vision of having a small commercial district. So basically, I'm not aware that there are that many existing vacant parcels left throughout the town, but I think it's important to acknowledge that anyone wishing to look at doing this, it's only allowed within the general commercial district and only as a conditional use. So any application, I mean, the town will certainly have control over review of the complete application, just as you will have on the subsequent conditional use permit application that you'll see. But as you're entering into deliberations, feel free to inquire with myself or the applicant if you have any questions.
And we'd had some input about that there were changes at the planning board from the original application. Is the applicant okay with the proposal that the planning board came up with that is ahead in front of the council tonight?
The applicant is certainly okay with that newly drafted language. Yes, you're right. It is different. Initially, what was originally submitted was very specific to a specific use, and we had drafted that way, not knowing what the overall intent would be.
Yeah. But ultimately, you were going to need a potential drive-through window either way. And if it had been an ice cream shop, you might have been barred from that based on the existing language without the changes that the planning board did.
That's correct, based on the existing language, but we had proposed language that would have allowed that drive-through ice cream.
Just for
carryout.
ice cream. Okay. Council have any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now it's time for the public, and Mr. Koussis. Did I say it right this time? Steve Koussis, thank you. If you could state your name and address. and,
Steve Koussis, 76 Spindrift Trail in Chickahood, North Carolina, 27949. Anyway, listen, guys, the reason that I came up here tonight is Spiros has asked me to come up and talk about the ice cream shop, and my children start at 22 and go down to 2. We live right here, and I think it'd be a great idea for this town to approve this just because we all love ice cream. You know, Spiros said, hey, we'll have some hazelnut and some pistachio because that's my favorite. But anyway, all joking aside, I have the Stack 'em High Pancake Houses. I'm very familiar with this piece of property. My family owned it a long time ago when a couple of those other mayors were in office. I think that it fits well with Southern Shores' community aspect. All these people that rent houses down here, that come down here during the summertime, that love our beaches, and those kind of things. An ice cream shop would be a wonderful, wonderful example of hometown. And so, anyway, I think you guys should consider it. Spirit's a very good man. He's a wonderful person, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lambros Valhos.
My name's Lambros Vlahos, 48 Honeysuckle Lane. I've been here, down here for 35 years. My family supported Rita's. I guess nobody else supported it. Obviously, the project failed. Yeah. I'm hoping that the town, as a mom and pop store, will put more effort into accepting or being lenient in some ways to get them in this position here, in this place. I think they're using the lot in the full potential, but I don't know if the town wants another, ice cream, one of those, what is that, ice cube machines that you see in Nags Head and things of that nature, or a big ATM on it. I think this is a perfect project for this lot, so I support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Valhos.
I'm Linda. I'm Lambros' wife. I live at 48 Honeysuckle Lane. And I think it's a great idea. I mean, you've got how many banks on that corner? 6? Who's putting money in them? The small mom and pops, you know. We've already got a McDonald's over there, so I don't know why you're worried about McDonald's moving there across the street, because I don't think they would be interested in that at all. So I think it's a great idea. I think it would, benefit Southern Shores and benefit the people of Kitty Hawk. And I know we tried to put a community garden there at some point, and I don't think that went over. So I don't see any reason to not approve that. The traffic there is, it's traffic. I mean, I can barely get into Wells Fargo half the time if I'm coming left. So the traffic is not going to be an issue, I don't think, especially since he has the exit on the back side into Food Lion parking lot. So I think it's a great idea. I think you guys should approve it.
Thank you. Pardon me if I screw your name up, but it's Vasilios. And then the last name begins with a K.
They call him Spiro. I know Spiro for many years, and his father and his family. I and his father immigrated here a long time ago, many years. We love the system like that. In the old country, we probably have to pay somebody big money, big money. So ice cream, I live in Southern Shore, 227 for 20 years. Would like to have some individual and friend of mine so I can get free ice cream sometimes. But I can't see any better thing to go in that place than for the kids to come. And as far as traffic, most of the ice cream places, they're not busy in the morning when people go to work or when they get off work. The time is a little different. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And then Joe Kay? Again, the same last name, but I'm not sure. That's good.
How you doing? My name is Joe Karagides. I live at 227 Woodland Drive in Southern Shores. We own the Castone Studio over in Powell's Point with the statues and the water fountains. I've lived here pretty much all my life. Grew up, went to Manio. I've watched the town change quite a bit in Southern Shores. I feel like in that area, this is kind of the perfect bit. I can't think of anything else actually that would go in that spot between the two banks that would benefit the town. You know, we're always looking for something that's good for us as local people who live here, not just tourists. I think it would be good for both, for the tourists and the people who live here. I have a 10-year-old. He's very excited about having an ice cream place there. Rita's was there for a while. There was a frozen yogurt place across the highway there. I can't see that it would be a traffic issue at all. It seems like it's almost like brew-through style. You know, you would just come in and then leave. So it would be pretty quick. It'd be like the bank business, really, seems like to me. So I've known Spiro for quite a while now. He's a good family man. He seems like he's a good businessman. He's got quite a few of those, and his family as well. So I think it'd be a great addition to Southern Shores.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is it Ari?
I would very much appreciate if you guys would let that ice cream place be there because I love ice cream and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job.
Chad Weeks.
Hi, I'm Chad Weeks, and I'm not sure if I'm able to be here or not. I live in Martins Point on Creek Road, but I work at Wells Fargo, and I'm on the round window right there viewing that lot. So I kind of would be impacted here a little bit. And I am strongly in favor of it. About 9 years ago, I transferred from Norfolk, where actually I went to high school with Spiros a long time ago, and know the family restaurant and Chesapeake Pizza that his family had in Great Bridge for, yes, over 40 years. And it still looks the same today as it did, back then. They keep it up. And I think his dad's still going in a few days a week. But very good family people, community folks, and we've had issues with that lot as far as I'm concerned because I'm kind of particular about landscaping and things. And, trees would be falling over and knocked over, and after a while, I'd go get my dad's truck and throw logs in the back of it because nobody would, clean it up from the bank next door. And then it was the community garden, as mentioned. Great idea with good intentions, back to Wounded Warriors. And then they weren't able to keep that up, and it was an eyesore for a few years, kind of overgrown. But I used to work with Spiros, too, at Merrill Lynch after high school and college, working on our masters, and our paths crossed again at Merrill Lynch. And internet was crashing down in the early 2000s, and we were over at Waterside going to lunch, and he's critiquing restaurants. So he just couldn't get it out of his blood, and sure enough, left Merrill Lynch and back in the restaurant business in about 2001, I guess. So he has a lot of restaurant experience. I'm thinking that for Spiros to do this is a strong commitment. I think if he wanted to appeal to tourists, he could have gone to Duck and gotten a window shop or something. but to actually commit to a piece of property and to take into effect the account of the David Stick style and the throwback days and the retro look. You know, to me, that's what Southern Shores is about. It screams, you know, heritage and tradition. So to take all of that into effect and to have, you know, a soft serve ice cream at lower prices versus us standing at like some of the higher end places where you go with your wife and it's $14. It's not that kind of a deal. It would be in and out. I don't see a drive-through backing up because from the operations of knowing the restaurant experience he has, if it was backing up, I think he'd hire more employees or somebody would be fired for not serving fast enough. So there's not going to be a backup. It's going to be run efficiently and kept up, and I think he's really has tried to do everything he can community-oriented first.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ryan Torrance.
He was signing in.
Thank you, Mr. Torrance. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this zoning text amendment? Ms. Bateman? Can, okay. So Ms. Bateman asked if it was strictly drive-through, and the answer was?
The answer is no.
It's not strictly drive-through.
There's walk-up windows.
Okay. And is anyone else who wishes to speak? Ms. Radomski?
Hi, my name is Tony Radomski, 40 Juniper Trail, and I guess I'm going to be not so well liked here. 2 reasons I'm kind of opposed to this. Number one, I do live on Juniper Trail. I think a backup that should happen and probably will happen with ice cream, or people are going to be coming off that highway, and then as they exit out the back way, they're going to exit onto Juniper Trail. Now, there were supposedly 3 lanes that you could come up to the stoplight and make a turn. However, if you look at that right-hand turn lane to get back onto 158, it is not existent. It is one great big giant broken pothole. It's horrible to make that turn. I make it every morning going to work. The second reason, I'm wondering if we need another ice cream establishment. As most of us, I would hope, know, we have a wonderful, wonderful yogurt shop already in existence in Southern Shores. They serve everything from frozen yogurt, Dippin' Dots. They bring in all kinds of goodies from New York. You can go in, you can sit down with your family, you can have a nice social event. It's not expensive. I don't think we can do any better. I would also, why do we have to cram so many buildings into this little tiny space? We have a bank, and a nice piece of green scenery right now between those banks. Why not leave it green? Why do we have to have wall-to-wall buildings? And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, I have eaten at your pizza place in Chesapeake. It is very good. So if you all live in Chesapeake, go eat there.
Is anyone else? Ms. Schwartzman?
Ann Scherdsma, 69 Hickory Trail in Southern Shores. I wasn't going to say anything, but I did attend the public hearing or the planning board meeting when this ZTA came up for discussion. And I wanted to bring to your attention a comment that was made by John Finelli at that meeting. He's the representative for Martins Point. He brought in the legislative history behind the current ordinance, which has the 2.5 acre requirement. And he said that that was put there because the town at that time wanted to keep congestion off of Juniper Trail. That's why that size was decided upon. That, to quote John, he said, drive-through not appropriate for every location. And I raised in the public hearing before the planning board the issue of congestion. I have some concerns about that at that location because you're not going to have people just coming from one location turning into the drive-through. You're going to have them coming from the west as well as from the east, as well as from the north, and conceivably from the south as well, all converging on this one small spot to go through
a drive-through. I would have liked some more thought put into that issue, the congestion, because you can have cars lining up, coming down the 158, both directions, lining up on Juniper, even coming out of the shopping center where Harris Teeter is. It seems to me it's going to be an issue, especially when there are a lot of vacationers here and those roads are heavily traveled. So I would have liked more consideration for that point rather than the nature of the business. I think it's beside the point whether he's serving ice cream or whether he's serving frozen yogurt or what's being served. The point of the ordinance is to serve the town by preventing the congestion. I mean, that's what it was all about. 2.5 acres, more space, less congestion. And now we're decreasing the size to less than half of an acre without giving much thought to the reason why this ordinance exists to begin with. So that's what I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this zoning text amendment? Seeing no one, Mr. Mayor, I'll give it back to you.
I got a question for you,
For me?
Ben. Yes. I know this is not exactly 100% related to the ZTA, but can you explain conditional use? And the reason I asked the question, assuming the ice cream shop were to go in and maybe 5 years later they decide they don't want to do it anymore and property is sold, would that mean that we would have to assess what the new business would be before we would approve it to be located there?
If you pass this text amendment, as it's proposed, then any business fitting the same requirements could continue to operate, fitting the same site. If they're not changing anything about the site plan or any of the requirements of the ordinance, they would have a permit and could continue to operate even if it was a different business.
Say they wanted to open a sandwich shop or a hamburger shop with a drive-through, they could do it.
Or coffee shop.
Coffee shop.
With the same, unless they made changes. If they made changes, then they'd have to come back. But even then, they would come back for a conditional use permit, and if they meet the requirements of the ordinance, then you have to give them the permit.
Okay. So that also means that with this CTA, someone could go over to the shopping center that Mike Stone owns and open a similar type drive-through with a small parcel of land.
If it meets all the requirements, one of them is fronting on 158, and the other is a size requirement. But those are the only requirements.
So it has to be on 158?
Yeah, it's one of the requirements is that the lot has to have frontage on 158.
That limits pretty much where they can put it.
It really narrows it down.
Impact Southern Shore.
Well, there's another commercial zone right north, or right at Martin's Point, this side, that has never been developed. That could be right there. So we have that. Question for Ben. And I'm missing names, but I don't know what the transaction, but about the existing language of the application. And then this was added. Would the existing application, and this is all we've got, the existing language, would that just have been a conditional use, not changing the code, I guess would be my question to you. Did you see the original application?
I did not.
Okay. I didn't either. So I'm wondering if we could do this without changing the code.
Well, I think that it's clear that even with the initial application, you couldn't do this without changing the code. But what's happened is that the applicant is now in agreement with the planning board's recommendation that's before you as to this is the change to the code that needs to happen. Their change to the code was still a change to the code, but if you're trying to completely avoid a change to the code, I don't think that that was possible under anybody's view of how it existed at the time.
Okay.
At least that's my understanding. Is that your understanding, Mr. Strader? So Mr. Strader agreed with that.
So how do I want to word this motion?
Motion to, if it's a motion to approve the ZTA, then it would be a motion to approve the ZTA as presented per the recommendation of the planning board.
I would like to make that motion to approve ZTA as presented by the planning board.
Thank you, Jim. Do I have a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion, council?
We're doing 1805, right?
1805, correct.
Yes.
And important to note that this will have to pass unanimously to avoid a second reading. So if it doesn't pass, then it doesn't pass, but if it doesn't pass unanimously
Then it has to.
today with a 4-0 vote, then we'll have to take it up on a second reading at another meeting. At that time, it can pass on a simple majority vote.
Okay, and let me get straight. Drive-through facility number, I'm looking on page 4 of 5, number 2. Drive-through facility or establishment, small. Okay, does this conflict with any other codes that we have? I mean, Sam, I guess were we in compliance everywhere as far as 2,500 square feet, the location is a minimum of 100 feet from residential zone, the stacking, and the lot frontage shall be on US 158 only, right?
That's what it says.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
I'm not sure what your question is. I'm glad to answer.
Well, I don't want to see,
You're looking for clarification. You just want to make sure you.
yeah, I want to make sure that this is all we're looking at, is this small, because we're,
Well, the only changes that you're looking at are, the underlined, everything else is already in existing code unless it's underlined. So there's a change on page 2 of 5.
Right.
To 36-57 to provide a definition of a drive-through facility.
Small.
Open paren, closed paren, small, and to change the existing drive-through facility language to include a large, so that, to differentiate the two. And then on page 3 of 5, there's a change allowing a drive-through facility small, and designating the parking spaces required for a drive-through facility small under 36-163. And then on the last page that you were looking at is the one where it allows it as a conditional use if it meets the requirements as spelled out that you already listed.
A, B, C, and D, right.
And it will have to meet there are additional conditional use requirements for all conditional uses. But I'd have to probably confine those in the next section. But all conditional uses have 2 or 3 other requirements. And conditional uses allow you to place reasonable conditions on the operation of and use of the facility once that application comes to you.
There's a motion on the floor, council, which has been seconded to approve ZTA 1805, submitted by 5415 OBX LLC. Any further discussion? Not hearing any further, I'd call for the vote. All in favor of approving this? Aye? Aye. Aye. Gary, you in favor? All opposed?
Nay.
Same sign. Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
So the motion was made and approved 3 votes to 1, Sheila.
But
Thank you.
that's not sufficient for the
No.
ordinance to change tonight.
Right.
So
we'll have to come on next.
would the applicant for the next hearing be interested in postponing that until after the second reading of the ZTA? Is there any way that you could meet the requirements without changing the ordinance? Okay, so would you like us to, would you like the council to
Table,
table or continue the item C until the second hearing on the current text amendment that was just? Thank you, Mr. Strader.
do we need a motion to that?
I think that would be the easiest thing that, I think that
Make a
per the
motion.
applicant's request.
We make a motion, we table CPU 1801, application number, which is ZTA, I'm looking, I don't see it on this front page.
It's the quasi-judicial land use matter, CUP 1801.
Yeah,
And I would set it for your next, go ahead and set it for your
for
next.
June,
And I will.
for June 5th.
I will ask the clerk to arrange that.
Will that require a
Agendize that.
supermajority vote also?
No.
No, the rereading of the ZTA will require only a simple majority to pass at that
Okay.
time. And then.
But their actual site plan
If the
does not
ZTA
require a supermajority.
No, if the ZTA passes, then we'll have the quasi-judicial hearing on the site plan
Okay.
and conditional use permit, and that does not require a supermajority. It only
Okay, I
requires
was
a
just trying to avoid them getting in the same boat
No.
again.
So my motion is to table
Table.
this until our June 5th meeting, after we have a vote again on the other.
ZTA 1805.
ZTA 1801.
ZTA 1801.
Right, 1805. Any further discussion, council? Second, sorry, need a second. Need a second to Gary's motion.
To table it.
I'll second.
Thank you, Fred. Motion and a second. Any further discussion, council? All in favor of tabling CUP 1801, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion's made and carried unanimously.
That's my.
Thank you. This time I'll open general public comment for the second time. Anyone signed up? Thank you, Gary. Lambros Vlaha?
Yes, sir, I'm good, thank you very much.
You spoke earlier.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Got carried away with the sign of every paper there.
He said he signed everything.
Stephen Koussis? I think he's already spoke. Do you want to speak again, Steve?
Yes, just real quick, I just wanted to say that,
Come on up here.
the congestion issues that you were talking about, we got a food line over here. I don't think this little spot's gonna do anything to that. I know that, but what I'm saying to you is that there's gonna be 1,000 people going into food line versus, but anyway, thank you for listening to us, and we appreciate the democracy of being able to come to a meeting like this and talk about these things. I wish we would have voted 4-0 in favor of it, but however, we'll see you June 5th at the next meeting. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Ladies.
Steve. Vasilios? Thank you. Chad Weeks? Good evening again.
I would just like to say that, there's a place in Norfolk called Dumars that has a lot of history.
Know what?
They're folks that really know how to run a restaurant. They hold the prices down, and they're great to the community. And they don't try to cater to the tourists. They put the people first, and they have a good price, and they're consistent. And it's on diners, drivers, and dives, and you name it. And you think of Norfolk, a lot of times you think Dumars, Norfolk, and all that. So I just really think this is an opportunity for somebody to do something on that lot that does something back to the people of Southern Shores. We're all locals here, so we know what happens in the summertime when we can't get to these places that have, I'll throw them out there, big bucks, Big Buck's great homemade ice cream. When I got 30 kids in front of me standing there, my wife and I are like, we're not even going to go in, we can go there during, the shoulder season real quick, But then after that, and even when we go in, we're going to spend $14. So I think this is somebody with fantastic values and trying to do something for us in a way that is going to stick with the design that I know is important with your families. You know, David Stick, you know, from your father and all that. And somebody is going to build on that at some point. It is zone commercial, so there will be cars coming in and out of that place. We're not in business, I don't feel like, to stop somebody from building on a commercial lot. It is already a commercial lot, so there's going to be cars in and out of there. But I don't think you'll ever have the opportunity again to have it reflect something that reflects the area and that so many people could use. Instead, what we do is say, let's just forget that, let's go to Food Line and get some ice cream and come back. But I can see, you know, down the road for Spiros or whatever, new quality Southern Shores or whatever with the flat top design. And I think would be successful for him, obviously, but it'd be successful for the area too. It's a brand or an image of something that would do that, like Dumars has done from Norfolk. Something will be there, but I don't think it'll ever be as good as this or have the wisdom and the experience behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Glenn Weider? Good evening, Glenn.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff. My name is Glenn Weider, and I am the president of the Chickahawk Property Owners Association. So I clearly understand the problem of tourist cut-through, and I appreciate the need to address the problem. As a representative of the residents of Chickahawk, however, I ask that the council be cognizant of the fact that no left turn on South Dogwood will significantly increase the amount of traffic cutting through Juniper and Trinity and create a problem in Chickahawk. This is a problem that affects not only the Dogwood Trail folks, but also the people in Chickahawk and the people that are on Juniper Trail. And any solution that's under consideration by this board should address both cut-through areas, not just Dogwood. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Just time I'll close public comment. Under other business, I just have one additional comment I'd like to make. Earlier tonight, I asked you to honor Paul and Helen Ford by a moment of silence. Just want to add a couple of thoughts to that because I didn't want to take the moment of silence time to tell you more about them and what they've done for our community. They have given so much of their time, energy, and resources to helping others here on the Outer Banks. Serving for many years on the board of the Outer Banks Community Foundation, each of them is president at different times, a total of 13 or 14 years of their time on that, working with that organization. They have a fund set up in perpetuity that generates about $2,500 a year for our residents and other people who need to come in and ask for grants, and they do give a $2,500 grant every year, $2,500 grant every year. Helen, through her sheer determination and her conviction, helped found Food for Thought, which all of us have heard of, I'm sure, and it has served an absolute essential need in our community. In a conversation with Helen yesterday, she said when she started Food for Thought years ago with help from other people in the community, it's an all-volunteer organization. As you know, no money gets paid to anybody who works except the fuel money for people who drive their cars to deliver the food itself to the schools. When she first started the program, 25% of Dare County families were using the program on the weekends for food for their kids. The most recent numbers, this is going to be hard to believe, it was for me, the most recent numbers are now we have 50% of the families in our town, in our community, not our town, on the Outer Banks, are using this service and taking advantage of the food that's for those children for the weekend. She was the one that really kicked this off and made it work. I just want to thank them publicly and tell them how much I personally appreciate their efforts and what they've done for us. My heart goes out to both of them for what they're going through right now, but they've decided they're going to handle that situation, and that's their conviction. That's what they should do. I thank you. Anybody else?
I've got a couple of things.
Go ahead.
During the last month, I've attended meetings, well, there's been 3 meetings that had a couple hundred people in those meetings alone. 2 of them, the governor was there. SSCA meetings, I went to a class on living shorelines over at Coastal Studies Institute. There's a lot happening in our community, a whole lot, but I feel kind of frustrated because rather than discussing a lot of those, I'd really feel compelled to go back to this subject of doxing the town employees. When their information is put out there in a public forum on social media, when the town has specifically tried to respect their privacy on this issue, I think we are doing them a very grave disservice. You don't accomplish things by alienating and highlighting your employees. I think your employees here at the town would like nothing more than to come in, keep their heads low, and do their job. I think it's very irresponsible to be doxing them like this in public. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jim. Any comments, Gary? Fred?
Yeah, I've got one comment. First of all, I want to say I'm not opposed to ice cream at all. I love it, just like everybody else. I guess it kind of shows, too. But what I was opposed to was the process on how we changed the ordinance. That was my concern. I just don't think it was a good process. I think the history of what we've tried to do in Southern Shores, maintaining in a small, low-dense community. We have limited commercial, and don't get me wrong, I want businesses to succeed here. But that was an extreme change going from 2.5 acres to a much smaller lot size. I guess the drive-through kind of bothered me, creating congestion there, but it's the process that concerned me, the way we changed it. I think ordinances are put in place for a specific reason, and the reason here was to maintain the ambiance of Southern Shores, and by changing it to smaller requirements, it's going to open the door for others to want to do the same thing. And the next thing we have is a line of small businesses in a more dense situation than we'd rather have. Same applies to our lot sizes for our homes. There have been attempts to make them smaller. Don't want to do that. Want to keep it like the original plan was to keep it a low-density community. We are a unique community. We're different than Kill Devil Hills, Kitty Hawk, even Duck, and I would like to see it remain that way. That's all I have.
Thank you, Fred.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I have one other thing I want to say before we do.
Well, you had your turn.
Let me, give me a minute.
I will say, we did have a tragedy in our community this week, and we didn't recognize that, but I wish we had.
Go
We had a 4-year-old that was swept away, and so we all know how strong that ocean can be at times, and I hope everyone has a very safe summer and be careful when they're out there on those beaches. And maybe keep that young man and his family in your prayers and as we go forward.
Thank you, Gary. Touching on what Jim said a minute ago, I don't want to hold you here much longer, but I just want to point out a couple of things to you. I did attend the Dementia Workshop. I think some of you in this room were there at Duckwoods Country Club. It was very worthwhile, a tremendous learning experience. Diane Denny and Governor Cooper did a good job that morning. Tina and I attended the opening ceremony of the Senior Games at the Baum Center on the 20th of April. We participated in the beach cleanup, with a number of you here, on the 21st. SSCA Beach, good turnout for that. We spent a wonderful evening at the All Saints Episcopal Church celebrating Father Tom Wilson and Pat's retirement. That was on the 27th. And on the 28th, we attended the opening ceremony for the Special Olympics in Kildelva Hills. Also very rewarding and very enlightening and very positive experience. If you could see the number of people at that Special Olympics who live here in Southern Shores, who take their time and put their energy into it for weeks and weeks and weeks every year to make it happen, it really moves your heart. It's so good to see the people that take their time, make that effort. A lot of people from Southern Shores. We had the majority of the folks there, and it was very exciting to see that. Duck Church, Kitty Hawk Methodist, All Saints, Holy Redeemer, all had people there, but we had the majority of them from Southern Shores. It was very encouraging. And that's all I have to say, and Gary's made a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Sure. All in favor? The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, folks.